Hey everyone, it's Madeline here, founder of Natural Hormone Healing, and I have a guest with me today. My guest today is a yoga instructor who has specialized in fertility yoga since 2012 and has developed a fertility yoga program that educates women on how to practice for their cycle. Its intent is to help women connect with their cyclical nature of their menstruation and to find nourishing movements to help optimize one's fertility. Before having her daughter in 2013, she struggled with multiple ectopic pregnancies. It was through this journey that she began to create a supportive community for other women going through fertility issues. Where she lived, through yoga, mindfulness, and other healing modalities, she healed her remaining fallopian tube and had 2 successful pregnancies. That is amazing. So welcome, Kate Nguy. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us more about your journey. It sounds like you've been definitely through like a big fertility journey. Can you share more about your experience?
For sure. So my first pregnancy that I ever had turned out to be an ectopic. And by the time I caught it, it was so far along that they had to remove that tube. And so it kind of caught us off guard. We weren't planning on having a child at that point. So at the time, it was just overwhelming. And so we just went with the motions. We didn't question things. It just was like, okay, this is what we have to do. When they went in to remove the tube, they did tell me that my other tube was completely healthy and that we would have no problems conceiving in the future. So I didn't think much more of it until a few years later when we decided, okay, we're going to officially start to try to have a family now. And we got pregnant quite quickly, but soon got the shock that that was also an ectopic pregnancy. Knowing that I only had 1 tube remaining, it kind of hit us like a brick wall of just being really concerned of what does this mean? Because at that point now, pregnancy for me was just loss. That's all it meant to me. And so I didn't know how or what this would look like for our future as a family. And so the doctor said that there's probably a little bit of scar tissue and that they would look into it with some tests, but that this sometimes happens, right? And that they caught it soon enough, so it should be fine. And so with the anxiety of that, it took us a full year of trying before we got pregnant again. And within that year, it was close to the year mark of not having any conceptions at that point, that we got sent to the fertility clinic. And so that was our first introduction of like, what does this all mean and what's really happening here as a bigger picture? And I remember in that appointment, they told me that most likely, if I was to have another ectopic pregnancy, it would mean that they would have to remove that tube and that I would have to go straight to IVF or IUI, that there would be no other choices for me. And I remember my husband and I walking out feeling completely overwhelmed and thinking that this can't be it. Like this is, it shocked us. It was completely unexplained. And so it was a week later that we found out that we were actually pregnant. I was due to go in for some tests and found out that I was pregnant. So they sent me for an ultrasound instead and automatically declared that it was an ectopic because they couldn't find a heartbeat. And I remember at that moment feeling a little uncertain, feeling that I wasn't sure if it was correct. I asked for a second opinion mainly because I was asymptomatic. It was an ectopic that I didn't have any of the cramping, none of the signs. And for me, it was just another shock. It was another blow of thinking that this was it, that we have no other options now. And to this day, I still feel a little uncertain of whether or not it was really an ectopic. It turned out that a week later, I had a cyst on my ovary that had ruptured. And so, but either way, we decided to be really conservative with it. I worked with an acupuncturist and a naturopath and decided it was in my best interest just to terminate the pregnancy and then spend the next year trying to do whatever I possibly could to heal that tube, so that way we could hopefully have a successful pregnancy or else be in an optimal position for IVF. And so in that time frame, shortly after we had terminated that pregnancy, my husband and I sat down and we had a big talk about what does this mean, right? Because I wasn't willing to go through multiple rounds of IVF just because I had seen so many women go through multiple rounds. And so we decided that we would do 1 round, and then after that we would just go to adoption if I couldn't have another successful pregnancy. And then in the meantime, for this next 6 months, I did tons of stuff. I did tons of acupuncture, lots of visceral manipulation, so a lot of belly massages, some Mayan abdominal massage, anything that I could read or find on the internet that may possibly help with fertility or scar tissue, I did it. I remember reading a book that recommended carrying a rose quartz in your pocket. And so I was like, I'll try anything. It doesn't matter how crazy it sounds, we're going to do it. And it turns out that I ended up healing my tube. I healed my tube. I personally think through visceral manipulation. I think through my yoga practice, through mindfulness. So a strong meditation practice where I actually visualized these little people going into my tube and scrubbing it clean every day, until I had to go for my HSG that came back saying that I had absolutely no scar tissue or swelling in that tube, and that it was unknown as to why I had ectopics. And so it was shortly after that that I got pregnant with my first daughter, and then successfully got pregnant 10 months later with my second daughter. So
Wow.
I had 2 kids back to back, essentially, from having 3 ectopic pregnancies and losses and being told that there was no hope and that the tube just had to come out, without really a lot of investigation. And I think that's when I decided that there had to be more, was that I understand the medical community is so overwhelmed, and they know what they know, and they know that IVF and IUI works. They know the stats of research studies, but I knew my body, and I knew that there had to be a reason for this happening. And if it wasn't going to be solved for fertility, I had to still figure out what the root of that cause was, because it would manifest in my life some point later on, whether that was through menopause or whatever stage I was in my womanhood. So I had to really find out what was the cause, what was the emotional blockage maybe, or the psychological barrier. And so that's where this work and this journey really began for me, was really wanting to dive deeper and understanding the feminine body and understanding my own body and really trusting my feminine intuition of that there had to be an answer that was being missed. And so I did the digging, and I tried anything that might have worked. And who's to say what worked? It all worked. In the end, like I always tell women when they're on this journey, is that it's a matter of, taking the information that you're taught and making your own recipe from it. And so for me, what worked was the things that felt good when I left that office or when I left that treatment. And those were the things I continued to do. And I still do to this day, because they make me feel good. And so, that's my journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, wow. That's an amazing story. So those women who are on the journey, in a similar position to you, I love the idea of them just, making their own recipe of like what's going to work. Do you have any other recommendations for what they can do, when they're going through this journey, what are some of the options that they can use? So you said visceral manipulation, and that
visceral manipulation and Mayan abdominal massage, they're very similar in nature. Different theories, I guess you could come down to it, but they both do an abdominal massage. So Mayan, definitely look into it. There's a lot of success with fertility, particularly those with any kind of scar tissue, so endometriosis as well. That's going to be really beneficial that way. Mayan abdominal massage, their theory is all around, it's not so much fertility focus. I found it had a huge effect on fertility, and a lot of my clients love it because of that as well. But they are working the organs. So they're massaging your organs. So they're actually going in there, massaging your gallbladder and your liver. And what we know is that our organs host a lot of our emotional baggage. And so when we can get in there and we can massage those, it's another way for us to release that emotion. And so what I often recommend women that are on this journey is to find a massage modality that works. Like Swedish massage is really great for releasing tension in the muscles and just being relaxing. But if we want to therapeutically get into our womb center, then I would definitely recommend something along those lines, where it's a visceral or a Mayan abdominal, something that's really focused on getting deep in the abdominal core and starting to massage there. Mainly because it's starting to create openness in that womb space, but it's also starting to work with the release of the emotions that are caught up in those tissues. And so that would be my one recommendation. The next recommendation I always say is that this journey is hard. It's extremely hard, and it's taxing. It's taxing on your emotional capacity, and it's taxing on your relationship. We can go in with the strongest relationship and the deepest love, and this journey can take us on a tailspin. And it's not because we don't love our partner, or that, we see a different side of them, is that this is one of the hardest things you'll ever have to go through. And so they've actually had studies that relate this to just as much stress as what cancer provides with cancer patients, that, our fertility journey and cancer are equally as stressful. And so, that's a life-threatening condition. And so it just shows you how deep fertility can really start to work into the psyche. And so I always recommend going to seek therapy of some sort. So that way, we're working the body to release that emotional element, but that we also have a way to talk through it as well and get some tools to help us with the psychological barriers. Because sometimes in these journeys, it is a lot of psychological barriers, things that we didn't know. When I went for my visceral manipulation with the lady that I go to see who's out of Banff, she talked to me a lot about my journey in the womb when I was young. And so when I was a baby, and my mom was a teen pregnancy with me. And so how a lot of maybe the restriction that I was feeling when I was in the womb state and when I was born and was a young child, of feeling all of that trauma and all of that all the journey that my mom had to go on of being a teen and trying to survive and, prove to the world that she could do this and that she wasn't going to give me up, that I took on a lot of that emotional baggage. And so I was really rigid and restricted in my own personal life as an adult now. And so a lot of that rigidity was carrying down into my reproductive organs. And so it was when I had that insight that I was like, whoa, that's deep stuff that I had never thought about before, about how I was affected by my mom's pregnancy and how she had to go through her emotional stuff during that time. And so that definitely helped me. It gave me something new to think about and something to work through. And I definitely think that was maybe part of my psychological barriers that I had to work through. So seeking therapy is a key element, because it can give us insight of things that might be little barriers for us. It may not be the cause of our fertility, but when we can release these little psychological barriers, we can find more self-love and we can find more capacity to really nurture and care for ourselves, which is really what this is about. And then from there, nutrition there's lots documented on nutrition and the importance of nutrition on this journey. How, eating can help not just with a healthy pregnancy, but when we want to get pregnant, we need to start acting like we are pregnant. And so how can we nourish the body before we even get into that state? Rather than waiting till we're there, let's start doing the same kind of stuff that we want to do now. So how can we reduce toxins? How can we take care of ourselves? And then a big element that I really think that has a huge effect on us is that we're really stuck in this masculine capacity energetic world right now. Like the Western world or the modern world is really geared towards striving for success, and it's very linear in movement. And what we need to do is really start to embrace more of that feminine energy. So, finding the capabilities of slowing down and taking care of the self. And so, I see a lot of clients, and when they first come to see me, they are stressed out. And the more that we can do to start to reflect on what our stressors are and what we can do to either let go of some responsibility or change lifestyle habits, can have a huge impact.
Yeah, so you offer fertility yoga. Tell us
Correct.
more how that can help support someone who's dealing with infertility and problems conceiving.
So the main thing with fertility yoga is that even if it wasn't fertility based, even if you were just going to a regular yoga class, you're creating movement in the body. And the movement that we're creating is very mindful. We're slowing down. We're letting go of all of the craziness that was outside those doors. And now we're going into a place where we can slow down, where we can connect with the body physically and connect with the body emotionally. And through this mindful movement, we can start to feel less stressed, less overwhelmed. We can also start to be able to slow down our pace of life and to really connect with how we're feeling and the sensations in the body. And so just going from like a normal class, this is kind of like some of the benefits that you get just from yoga itself. Now, if we take that a step further and making it into a fertility yoga class, our main focus is going to be on increasing circulation in through the pelvis and into the womb center. So we really want to make sure that we're helping the body create a strong endometrium lining. We want to create strong blood flow, a lot of energy movement, and allowing our body to discharge. A part of the process of trying to conceive is sometimes we just don't feel grounded. And so these poses can help ground us and allow us to discharge things that are no longer serving us in our life. And so just the basis of fertility yoga, that's often what it is. It's about, creating movement in the body, increasing circulation, and then really supporting post-ovulation, supporting the body to hold a pregnancy and to hold the energetics of being a pregnant and moving into that stage of motherhood. And then the other element of it is all on neurology, of now starting to work with the brain and how we can start to work with our nervous system and deregulate, getting out of that freeze or fight stage and getting more into that rest and digest state. And so, really kicking in that parasympathetic nervous system to help support us and start to heal on a deep molecular level.
Yeah, that's so important. That's something I'm always encouraging women in my programs to find something that's going to work for them to help stabilize their nervous system and get out of fight or flight. Because when you have that stress, fertility is impacted. Your hormones are all impacted. Your progesterone will not be as high. So it doesn't, I always like to say, it doesn't really matter what you choose. You need to find something that works, that gets you out of that. And I think doing yoga, like I tried out one of the yoga practices from your course today, and it just made so much sense that having a yoga practice that you can do, just even if it's 20 minutes, to re-regulate your nervous system on a daily basis. And and if you can really focus it on fertility for the phases of your menstrual cycle, that's just the next level. So can you take us through? So Kate offers a course on fertility yoga for the phases of the menstrual cycle. So she offers just a video for each phase and educates you about that. So can you let me know, like, your background, how you started getting into the phases of the cycle, and then maybe take us through how you can just how you would change the yoga in each phase and how that works.
For sure. So when I first started creating programs for fertility yoga back in 2012, I was really focused on the physical state of the body. I was focused on tight muscles, what muscles are tight, and creating restriction in the pelvis, what we had to loosen and soften to create circulation, and where we could create strengthening. But what I realized through the whole process, and I kind of seen this as I was moving through and working with clients, was that there was still an element that was missing. And for me, that element was starting to realize that we're not linear. We're very cyclical creatures, and we're meant to cycle. We're meant to be able to transition and move from stage to stage and continue that circle throughout each cycle that we have. And so this is when I started getting curious about, what's happening in my body and why do I not feel the same every week of my cycle? What's going on, and how can I start to nourish that? And the more research that I started doing in it, the more that I found that there's tons of work out here in this, but it's just not something that we're educated on. And it really kind of shocked me that, I went through school and sex ed and was never taught any of this. I was taught that, you get your period, and if you have sex, you get pregnant, which is so far from the truth of especially when you're on this fertility journey. And so what I really feel like we're missing in education, especially with young girls and teens, and then as women move into that state of wanting to be going to the motherhood state, is that we need to work with our cycle. We need to understand how not only energetically things are shifting, but even our endocrine system is working completely different. Our body requires certain things. And so the more that we're able to tune into that, and the more that we're able to nurture the body so that it can transition without any hiccups, the more that the whole system works better. And every cycle that we have, we nourish the body even more and more. And like you could probably already say with your program that you have, when we really start to follow this, when we really start to key into what is needed, our PMS symptoms start to minimize. They say that the PMS symptoms are often like a toxic overload. And so whether that's a toxin from our environment or our emotional state, or how we've been physically treating our body, those PMS symptoms are a result of not taking care of ourselves. And so it's a big way of our body calling to us saying, please look after me. And so I created a program 2 years ago about how to practice for our cycle. And so the way that I see the cycle is we'll start with the menstruation. With menstruation, this is kind of like the key to it all, I think, for each cycle. If we have a really strong and connected menstruation, the rest of our cycle becomes healthier from it. And so the first step with that is stopping to the shame element that comes with our menstruation, letting go of this self-talk that some way our menstruation's bad or that we're dirty from it or all those things, where actually this is a natural, beautiful, energetic state. This is when our body is intuitive with what it needs. This is when it's cleansing everything that it needs to get rid of so that it can have a really strong follicular phase. And so the body, because it's so intelligent during this stage, it knows what it needs to do here. And so what I always say when we start off with the menstruation stage, this is when you need to do less. This is when you need to just really hibernate. It's our inner winter stage. And so when we look at the inner winter stage, when we look at winter outside, the last thing we want to do is go out for a run or, think about going to the beach and sitting on a cold frozen sand. We want to stay inside. We want to be by the fire. We want to cuddle up in a blanket and have a cup of tea. So this is what we need to do for our body. We give our body that same kind of hibernation. So this is when, if you can, it's really hard in a lot of workplaces, but this is when you would want to do less even at work. Like I always encourage women on your first day or two, call in sick if you need to, really take care of yourself. If you're feeling exhausted, listen to your body and just do what you need to do for that stage. Yeah. If you know that this is a really great way to start planning even business meetings or interviews, or if you're in school, how to work out what assignments you're going to do when, try to do as least amount possible during this stage.
Yeah. And I think during that stage, a lot of emotions are going to come up too, especially those on the fertility journey. You might feel a lot of sadness. I know for me in my menstrual phase, if I have some sadness that I need to get out, I really get that out. But also when you can approach it with a mindset of nourishing and really self-care, it can help you, support you through that time as well.
The tears are a way to cleanse the body. They're just a different way to cleanse from internal. And so this is a time that you need to grieve the loss of that maybe you didn't get pregnant this month, or you just need to feel that emotional rush, whatever is going on in your life. So this is the time where, it's our internal energy. This is when I really encourage women, to not go out and be social or, just take that time for yourself. Give yourself the permission to watch TV by yourself. Watch the movie that you want by yourself, guilt-free. But this is also the time that when we're looking at yoga in particular, that I say do restorative practices. Right now, your body already knows what it needs to do. It's flushing, it's structurally, it's doing everything possible it has to do to make a supportive cycle when we hit our follicular phase. So we don't need to do anything. What we need to do is to support it so that it feels like it can transition and do what it needs to. And so this is where restorative is key. There's different philosophies out there and different practices that say that it's still okay to do hatha practices or it's still okay to do inversions. And that might be the case. There's really little research on it. But from my point of view, when it comes to trying to conceive, let's just do what we need to care for the self. Why push ourselves? Why we can let go of that ego state of having to do these things that we can do all the time through our cycle and really be in this place where we can just care for ourselves. And so restorative, even if it's 2 poses, when I did my restorative training, it was really interesting. She was talking in particular about women with young children, that it's really important just to lock yourself in the bathroom and do legs up the wall for 5 minutes, just so you can decompress your nervous system. Yeah. But the same goes when it's a fertility journey, that to decompress everything that's happened this month and to really let go of that sadness so that we can start a whole new stage. We have to work with that nervous system. And that's what restorative yoga is all about. Restorative yoga is all about the nervous system and how we can get out of that sympathetic state and really get into the parasympathetic, which is where our body goes when we're sleeping at night. It's the rest and digest. This is how we digest our food. This is how our body heals on a molecular level. So if we have, especially any kind of diagnosis going on, we want to support the body in that menstrual phase. So that way we're making that strong base for healing. so that way when we go into the follicular phase, we have the strength to carry us through. This is also a really great time for meditation practices. Really be internal with all of your practice. This is all about going inwards. So meditations, yoga nidras. There's a lot of research showing yoga nidra being beneficial for healing from different conditions, but in particularly fertility as well. And so this is the time that you really want to start those kind of practices. And also respect that you're exhausted during this time. Energetically, your body is doing a lot, and so it needs to rest. So take naps, go to bed early, do all those things that you really need to do to nourish yourself. And then as we move into the follicular phase, this part of our cycle, this is when estrogen's now starting to really spike, which makes us social, which makes us outgoing. But it's also the time when our testosterone's rising. All our hormones are trying to peak because they want to get to that ovulation stage. So during this time, this is when we have the most energy. And as much as I encourage people to be free with your movements in this stage and do as much as you like, or to do whatever practices you want, I also recommend that as you start to come out of that menstruation stage, take a few days and slowly work into the practice. Just don't go into a hardcore practice on the last day of bleed, because we've got to remember, our body is in that transition mode. It's very different from day 1 of follicular to day 5 of follicular of how we're feeling energetically. Our hormones are climbing that mountain, and so our movement takes the same kind of progress as well. We can still do a strong hatha practice, but also maybe do a shorter hatha practice for the first few days, and then after that really build into doing more movement. But in particular, when we look at the follicular phase, this is where I really like to encourage women to do a lot of movements that are going to help them ground. So we do a lot of standing postures to feel supported and grounded and rooted. So those are some keywords that we look at. But then from there, we also want to use the body and use movement so that way we can discharge energy. So just like we were talking about with massage therapy, how we need to move those emotions out of the body through our tissues, we can do the same with our yoga practice. So through movement and stretching, we're creating this surge of energy. And so we can use the breath and the body to create this discharge of things that are no longer serving us, or getting us in a stable, grounded, safe space. And so in particular, in these practices, I like to look at a lot of hatha, but a lot of hip movements. And so things that are going to stretch and open up the hip structure, things that are also going to strengthen and release some tension in through the back.
What are a couple exercises someone can do, even if they don't have time for a full yoga practice? What are stretches that someone can do in the follicular phase?
For the follicular phase, what I would say is just Tadasana, just standing still with your arms along your side and feel your feet grounded down, right? Because grounding is the first thing. And then from there, practice a warrior series, going into different lunges. Be playful with your lunges. Go into a lunge with, the back heel off the floor for a bit and see how that feels when you just do some pelvic tilts and move, your left hip forward, right hip back. Just play with how the pelvis can move, because the pelvis is our biggest joint. And so thinking about how our torso sits in it and both of our legs sit in it, you can move that pelvis just by moving different elements of our body. And so, practicing and playing with how we lunge and how we place the back foot can create a lot of opening, start to create some circulation and movement into that psoas muscle in particular. If you want a more sitting down poses, grounding poses, going into pigeon. Pigeon's a really good one to get into those hips. Anything that's really going to stretch the low back and stretch the legs into the hips are going to be good things. We also want to focus on strengthening our inner thighs. So any kind of movements that we do, really seeing how we can engage those inner thighs to energetically start charging that energy up and through the pelvis. So
okay. And then we're on to the ovulatory phase. So ovulation, that's a big time for
this is a big time. So ovulation, technically ovulation's like a day or two, but I always consider it 5 days beforehand. So you're in the follicular phase, so you can still do some of the follicular stuff in the ovulatory, or if you want, start to slow it down a bit. So as we know, our ovulation is our summer season, which if you think of summer, you're really heightened with energy. This is when you're really excited. You want to do a lot of things. You're amped up, you're social, you feel like you can take on the world.
Sex drive is high.
Exactly. When it comes to fertility, this is often when we take on so much stuff and then we're trying to schedule in sex on top of that, which creates a lot of tension with our partners, right? Because it takes the spontaneity out of things. But it's also just another thing on a to-do list. And so ovulation is really a time for connection. This is when, even though our energy and our hormones are telling us we could do anything, I like to get women to just slow it down a bit. So that way they can be more present in the process and present in what they're asking their body to actually do. You're asking your body to conceive and create a life. So let's be a little bit more present for it. And so this is when I really suggest people to do a yin practice. And so for those who've never done yin, yin is very close to restorative. It's just the poses are very similar. The length of holds are very similar, but the intentions are completely different. So with yin, we're looking more along the lines of Chinese medicine and working with the meridian lines and getting qi movement. And so this is why it can be really beneficial during ovulation, is because we need energy to circulate and move into that pelvis and to really support the womb state. And so just like we would go for acupuncture, this is a way that we can do acupressure on our body through simple poses. And the beautiful thing about it is that these poses are all seated, so you can just sit down and you just hold them for 3 to 5 minutes. Now, when it comes to fertility, I generally suggest closer to the 4 to 5 minutes to really optimize that stillness. But I think it's really beneficial in the ovulation stage just because we're so busy and we're so outward that we need to start preparing ourselves for the next transition, which is going internal in the luteal phase. And so if we can ground ourselves a little bit, so that way we can actually start to enjoy and appreciate our partners and appreciate the idea of conception and finding more than just a time slot for sex, but really making it something that we're looking forward to, an event, right? And so that's what I kind of recommend when it comes to the ovulation stage.
Yeah, that's really interesting because, for those not wanting to conceive, usually we're saying, I'm usually saying, go do exercise, like use your energy, but that's so different than fertility. You want to ground in. Okay, so let's talk luteal phase, which is after ovulation to menstruation.
Yeah. So luteal it's a hard time for women on this journey because this is the time where we have high hopes, but we're terrified as hell of what's going to happen. So we're just on edge for 2 weeks. And so this is the time that I say, let's just support the body. We've already created the circulation. We've already done everything that we possibly could. We've either conceived or we haven't. And so now it's all about heart space. It's about either heart space, starting to slow down the process and be full of heart and heart opening so that we can move into that motherhood state. Because when we get pregnant, everything shifts. Now it's all about taking care of our body and ourself to grow a life. Or the other process is if we're not pregnant, we still need to be able to support and love ourselves and have that heart openness as we move into that grieving stage of menstruation again. So luteal for me is all about heart. And so in these practices, this is a good time that you can still, if you're starting to feel overwhelmed, still do restorative or do a yin practice just to help keep you, slowing down the body. But this is also a really good time that we can get back into the hatha practices, but really all of our movements are focused on the heart. How can we create space to be vulnerable and to be open and accepting of what might be coming our way, either way? And so in the luteal, I do a lot of heart work with women. We do a lot of just creating this capacity to feel large life in our heart space and just being really open to opportunity. This is where we do a lot of work on affirmations. We do a lot of work in manifestation, whether you want to look at it as manifestation or want to look at it as neuroscience. I use a lot of Dr. Rick Hanson's work. He's a neurologist, I believe out of the States, and he has a really great book called Hardwiring Happiness. And it's all about how we have the ability to create more positive like neurons in our brain through a simple 10 to 15 second meditation. And so these are the things that we do in the luteal phase is we do these little tricks that we can start to teach ourselves how to be more positive and more, uplifted and more hopeful, regardless of how it's going to go. Because even at the end of the day, if it doesn't turn out the way we want, we know that we've done the best that we could. And it's not over. Our journey's not over. That's one cycle amongst many still to come. And so we just keep chipping away at it. So that's the luteal phase for us. Yes.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So then and then we go on to the menstrual phase or conception, and it just goes from there.
Yeah.
Okay.
We just keep building it. Yeah, for sure. But the biggest message that I like to give women is that our body is not the same each week. And so how can we start to transition? And it's really amazing that when women start to see how their body's different each week, when they start to see it through like practical notes and information based, and then they start to feel it in their body. They're like, you're right, in the luteal phase I'm starting to want to, I want to journal more. I want to be crafty. I want to start a project that's just about me. I want me time. And so starting to listen to that versus forcing yourself to do something that you don't like. And the more that we start to listen to our body and nourish ourselves that way, the more that everything changes for ourselves. And the more that we really start to honor and energize that feminine energy within us, that helps to build that fertility element.
Yeah. So you also offer, so you have an online course, but then you also offer yoga out of your home. You offer courses, right?
Yeah, I have a home studio. So we do a weekly class here. The great thing about it is that it's a community, right? So when you get to come to these weekly classes, you have a community. We always start off with a little 5-minute talk, and then we go into a practice. I have little cards for women to indicate where they are in their cycle. And then I try my best to accommodate majority of the class of, hopefully most of them are in one part of their cycle. Like last night we had it half and half. Half were in follicular, half were in luteal. And so we did a follicular practice, but certain poses I took out for the luteal and said, okay, you guys do this instead. So I still customize it in that one-to-one, so that way everyone's still getting support for their cycle. And then afterwards...
And you're in Edmonton, so if anyone's in Edmonton,
yeah.
Get with Kate.
And then after that, we have a nice cup of tea. So I work with a herbologist here in Edmonton who's crafted 2 teas for me, one for the follicular phase and one for the luteal. And so then we have our tea for where we are in our cycle, and we have a little social chat of where we're at and what's going on for us. And it's just a good time for women to connect and share about their journey and feel not so alone and isolated, because it's hard when we're on this journey to find others that can relate to us and supportive.
It's important because sometimes your family, your good friends, they might not understand. So having other people that are going through the journey with you is essential.
It's so important. It makes us feel like we're not alone, and it makes us feel whole in a way that, that it's not something that we have done. This is just something that's been dealt to us. So, but there's others out there who become good friends. I have so many women that stay connected afterwards when they go into motherhood with their new little ones, and these moms still connect and go to yoga classes together. And so it's really amazing to see how these relationships build and how there's a support system through all of it. So.
Well, Kate, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. I'm really inspired to hear your story, and just know, and just any woman listening, just knowing that you have a support system that you can tap into. So can you tell us a little bit more about your course and what you're offering, just with, how they can get access to your course?
For sure. So on my website, www.sacredspacesyoga.com, or sacredspacesyoga.com, there's a link there for online courses. If you click on that, it's going to take you to another portal where all my online videos are. And so you just create an account. My main package that I have going right now is practicing for your cycle, creating the fertile body. And so that package, what you get in it is you get a video on yoga DIY props, so how to build your own props at home if you don't have them. You get a video on pranayama techniques that are really supportive for fertility, so that's breathing techniques to help us create more life force in the body. You'll also get a yoga nidra recording. There's one meditation recording on there right now, but there is going to be a few more in the near future here. I'm just going to finish recording them and then get them uploaded. And then as for the cycle stuff, there's 4 courses on there, 4 different lessons. And so there's one lesson for each stage of your cycle. So for each stage, so for your menstruation, your follicular, ovulation, and luteal, what you'll get in there is you'll get 2 different yoga practices. One's a short practice. I tried to keep them at the 10 to 15 mark. Unfortunately, most of them are at the 20-minute mark. It was really hard to condense them. And then you get a longer practice that's usually around the 45 to 50-minute mark. So it's meant to be able to help those for whatever time frame you have. If you only have a little bit of time, just start listening to one of them, and then carry on as the week goes on. You also get an information video with each lesson, so that goes into what to expect with that part of your cycle. How can you really nourish the body in that cycle? So each lesson has 3 videos, an information one and then 2 yoga practices. And so that whole package is meant to just help support you and how to start practicing through your whole cycle. From there, I'm slowly getting a few other packages launched. They're going to be mini packages. The idea is that you buy the main one first, because it's really important for us to know how to practice for our cycle and to start that process. And then the other little mini packages are going to be protocols to complement those. So they're going to take some time for me to launch all of them. We'll have the ectopic and the fibroid ones launched here in the next month.
These are yoga-based protocols?
Yeah, yoga-based protocols. So I have the ectopic one has 3 videos, I believe, in it, and the fibroid has 4, if I'm correct. And so those little mini packages, the idea is that you just insert those into parts of the cycle that's indicated in those protocols. So with the topics in particular, that's where we want to focus a lot of our work in the first half of our cycle. So that's where we do a lot of that in the follicular phase. So those mini practices you can add in, rather than doing the follicular, you could do those ones instead. But then after the follicular, you go back to practicing the main package and going back into practicing for your ovulation and so forth. So these are only meant to be supplementary to help with specific conditions. So my idea is over the next year to year and a half to get all of them launched for PCOS, endometriosis. It's just that it's a big project. So it'll take a little bit of time, but the idea is big and it's going to grow. It's just a matter of recording and getting them launched. But expect in the next month to have both of those done. So if you're someone who's suffering from ectopics or fibroids, those ones are recorded. I just have to do some editing and then they will be up and available to purchase as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. So I do recommend you check that out. So it's sacredspacesyoga.com.
Yes.
And we also have a special offer for you listening if you want to get the nutrition support. So I offer a program called Eating for Your Cycle, where I teach women how to eat and nourish their body for the phases of their cycle. And you also get custom protocols for endometriosis, PCOS, and some other self-care support. So our courses, if you're wanting that, the yoga combined with the nutrition, if you just want the full self-care fertility package, then you can also contact us. I will link our contact below. You can get a hold of me at support@Natural Hormone Healing, and we can hook you up with a special price if you want to just get that full support, because we want to see you succeed. And we really think this would be a great support together.
For sure. They complement each other so well that it'll be great for anyone that's going through this fertility journey.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Kate, for joining us. And and you are also on Facebook, right? You mentioned.
I am on Facebook as well. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right. Well, I'll talk to everyone later. Just let us know if you have any comments or thoughts. Just type them in the comments. And if you know any other women who is on the fertility journey that you think would like this program, definitely feel free to share this with her as well. And I'll talk to you all soon.